Is to watch all of us recorded. Hi, welcome. Just find a spot to sit. So just a couple housekeeping things. There's bathrooms directly across the hallway from here. Feel free at any time to get up and go take care of your needs. There's also more pizza and water out there, again, if you need to walk out and do that. If you need to stand up and stand or stretch or do some yoga on the sideline, that's totally fine. If you want to sit on the floor up here, that's okay too. Whatever it is that you need, please take care of yourselves. We put a little pack of sticky notes on each table. There's going to be time to ask questions after each of the different groups talk. One of the ways that you can do that is by writing a question on a sticky note. We'll just collect those and we'll answer them so that we also get a chance to get through everyone's questions as we can. Yeah, welcome, come on in, just take a seat. So, without further ado, I'm just going to tell you about the process, the sort of structure of the evening. If you could push oh, look at that. Okay, so we have 3 different sessions tonight. Our first session is going to be led by our counseling team, and they're excited to share with you some of the information that they have around what is the high school pathway and what does it look like. The second session is going to be led by Kim Kirk, our instructional coach, right over there in the white sweatshirt. And she's going to talk about some of the platforms that teachers use to deliver content and that students use to turn in assignments and that kind of thing. It's kind of a new language for a lot of families. So she's going to try and demystify the Teams and OneNote experience. And then finally, the administrative team is going to join me up here, and we're going to talk through sort of who are we as a school, what do we believe in, what is our focus for our work together as a staff and with our students, and then what are some of the particular policies and practices that help guide your students' experience through school and would be really probably helpful for you to know about so you know how to engage with us around some of those topics. And then, of course, there's always time for Q&A. So if you have questions, like I said before, there's little sticky notes. Feel free to write your question down. We're going to gather them up at the end of each session and go through them and, get your questions answered. So without any further ado, I would love to introduce our 4 counselors. One of our counselors is on leave for the first part of the year and will be back the second part of the year. So if your kid has a last name E through K. They have the pleasure of having Jen Cowan this semester, and then they'll have Gwen Featheroff second semester, but I'm sure they'll explain that as well. So come on up, and I'm just going to pass the microphone to the first person that is going to speak, and then you'll just pass it around to each other.
So I am Jennifer Cowan. I'm filling in for Gwen Featheroff first semester for names E through K, last names E through K.
And I am Amy Jelt. I work with students with last names A through D.
I am Hannah Schutz, and I work with L through R-E.
Hello, and I'm John Vandermoen, and I'm at the end of the alphabet, so RH to Z. Thank you everyone for being here.
Also have Christina Campbell here, who is a close member of our team and is our prevention intervention specialist and is helping with this wonderful tabling that's happening outside. So we're very grateful for her, and she's also here as part of our team.
Okay. All right, we're going to dive right in. So for graduation, there are more than just passing classes. There are actually 4 different requirements that all students will be working on throughout their high school experience. But in fact, one of them might already be done, which is really kind of an exciting thing when we tell students that you're already on your way. So, and we're going to talk in detail about each one of these, but the Washington State history is actually, if your student was in one of the Bellingham Public Middle Schools, they likely completed that in 7th grade. So if they did, check, it's on their transcript, they're good to go. If they didn't go to a Bellingham Public School or they didn't pass that class, we've got you. We've got a program, it's online, it's pretty quick and easy, and students can complete that while they're in high school as well. The second thing are credits. So that's probably what a lot of us are familiar with, right? You take a class, you earn credit, all of those credits add up to 30, or often a lot of ZOM students will earn more than 30 credits. And those are going to be in specific areas, and Ms. Schutz will tell us a little more about that. The third one is the graduation pathway. And this is really your child's opportunity to decide what they're hoping to get out of high school and what pathway they want to use to be able to meet that. So we have Mr. Vanderbilt will actually talk about that, a lot of those different options. And then finally, the High School and Beyond plan. And this is something that students, I think they might have been already had one of their first entries into this. We're using a new platform this year called Zello. And that's something that they'll do every year through our anchor classes. So we're gonna dive into all of these, but first, that feels like a lot. So on our next slide, we have a lot of ways that we support students, all students, so every single year, like I mentioned, there's the High School and Beyond Planning and Anchor. So there's activities that will be specific to each grade level. And so it kind of helps them, starting with 9th grade, exploring what are some of the things you're interested in, maybe looking at a variety of different careers and pathways. 10th grade, diving in a little bit deeper. Okay, what might that look like? How do I get there? 11th grade, making a little bit more, kind of like, oh, I think I know what I'm interested in. What does that really look like up to 12th grade? Here's what I'm planning to do. The second thing that all students receive are yearly scheduling meetings with their counselor. And so we have a registration week where we give out all of the information. And then after students have looked through the catalog, maybe decided, hey, this is a really interesting class I want to take, talked with their previous teachers, they then meet with us and we make sure they're taking all the classes that they need for graduation. And also that just align with their interests. So that's something that happens every year for everyone. Then we also dive in specifically each year as counselors. So in 9th grade, we actually go into tech lit classes. Do we have any 9th grade parents? Yeah. So we haven't gone into the tech lit classes yet, so they probably haven't. I'm sure it's a really riveting presentation. But we go in and we talk about kind of an intro to high school. What are credits? So we're going to dive in more specifically. What are the different credits that you need? What does it look like when you earn a credit? How many do you need? And so we break all that down, and we usually do some sort of High School and Beyond plan activity as well. In 10th grade, we again go into classrooms. This year we're planning to go into English classes, and this one is a little bit more, they've kind of gone through their first year, they know about credits, they know about how classes work, and then we talk a little bit more about, okay, well what are some post-high school options? What have you already done so far that has been, really exciting that you might want to learn more about? Without having to say, what are you going to be when you grow up? It's more of, hey, here's a ton of options. So we do a variety of activities. The cool thing about 10th grade is you also get to plan for your 11th and 12th grade years, where a lot of options open. So that's one of the things that we'll introduce to them, and also kind of front load for when they're planning for their classes for 11th and 12th grade. Then in 11th grade, we will have a junior info night where we invite families to come in. We give a presentation around the nuts and bolts of post-high school plans. We'll dive in a lot deeper to things like college application process, SATs. We'll talk about apprenticeships, what that looks like, financial aid. So kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of what that post-high school plan can look like. We always encourage students to come and do an individual meeting junior year just to talk about, hey, what does that look like? Again, we'll meet with them about their schedule, but we always encourage students to come check in with us about what they're thinking. We also offer junior year, well, I guess technically it's open to everybody, but we really promote it for juniors to go on. We have, I think this month, we have students going next week to an apprenticeship tour down in Skagit Valley. So actually getting to do some hands-on, exposure to a variety of trades. I think next month they're going to BTC to check out all the different opportunities there. We have college reps that actually come to Seaholm. We just had University of Washington last week. So kind of making the decision a little bit more to get more specific information about things they're interested in. 12th grade, so we're kind of in the thick of this right now. We do individual senior meetings, and that's a requirement for their high school and beyond plan to meet with us and just kind of solidify, hey, what is that looking like? And if at that point in time they're like, I'm still not really sure, it's a great way for us to connect and be like, hey, let's make sure you are going on those field trips. And kind of working with them throughout the year. So it's kind of that collaboration. So it's not just a one and done, this is what your plan is, but it's, okay, you're thinking about doing an apprenticeship. Did you go on the apprenticeship tour? Great. Were you able to find somebody to connect with to be able to sign up for that? Awesome. How do we upload a transcript? We got you. Here's how it works. So that's kind of all the different student supports that we run for all students and then individually throughout the year for each grade.
I agree. Okay, so one of the things when we talk about, so I'm going to break down credits a bit, but I wanted to just reiterate that I hope you're getting that it takes a village, and we're going to be working with your students all 4 years in multiple capacities. So one of the things that we do is work with them on their credits for graduation, but not just that, credits that support their post-high school plans. So exploring, right, these elective choice classes, preparing them if they're looking at four-year college, what does that look like for them in a particular area of interest. So all of your students are taking classes you need for graduation, period, right now. They've only seen their first semester likely, so I've had some students asking about, like, oh, my friends have health and I don't have that. Well, they probably have it next semester, and we'll open that up closer to the semester. So some of the credits that they take, they'll take all 4 years, like English, and some of the classes that they'll take will be very grade specific. And every spring, starting in February and into March, we spend time meeting with every single student in the school to make sure that they are registered for their classes for the fall. What that means is they put their choices in for the fall, and then we work all throughout the spring to try and put together schedules that make sense based on what we can run as far as classes. So when we do that, we'll do that for 9th graders this spring, looking at 10th grade and on. We're helping them track these credits. So I don't want parents, family to worry too much about memorizing this or getting an idea of how everything adds up. We'll do that with you, but it is always something that we also empower students to know. They can see their grad recs in Skyward. We ask them and talk with them every spring we register, and we talk with them when they come in and ask us about what they're interested in, and we kind of tie it back to the classes that they're taking. Some of the classes that are typically taken in 9th grade are the Tech Lit and Health, English, obviously biology, their math, some are starting world language. These other electives are classes that are choice classes beyond the requirements that you see up here. So if a student took a 4th credit of math in their senior year or beyond Algebra 2, it would technically go in as an elective in Skyward. It will still go in as math on their transcript. So sometimes students will say, what are these elective? They're like magical, these elective courses, and they're just classes that students get to pick beyond the minimum requirements for graduation. So if you ever have a question about your student and you're concerned that maybe they have something that you think they should have had and they're not sure why it's not on their scheduling, please always reach out to their counselor. Encourage them to reach out if they have questions about sequencing in classes. If for any reason your student is struggling in a class, I know we're getting into the thick of classes now, please also encourage them to reach out to us. You're welcome to reach out to us. We want to have students find success, especially this, if it's 9th grade or the first semester in high school is really important, and we want them to make sure they have the supports they need, so don't hesitate to reach out. This is a pretty wordy slide, but really we just wanted to show again a visual of what a schedule could look like through high school. Obviously this is a student who is starting in algebra, some students might be starting in geometry, but we wanted to show that, for example, the students take English all 4 years, and in 11th and 12th grade they have some choices. So that's an English elective, it's still an English class, but a choice English class. Students are starting in biology, and in 10th grade they'll have some options for chemistry. They'll have a couple different options for chemistry, and they'll take world history or AP World. So there's some classes that are sequenced with their peers, like world history is taken in 10th grade or AP World. Chemistry is typically taken in 10th grade. So some of these classes they'll have with peers, and some of them might be electives that they'd have with any age peer, or a language that they might start in 9th grade, or they might start it in 10th grade. So this is just an example. Sometimes, because students take 8.25 credits a year, and if you multiply that by 4, it's 33 credits, so there's a little bit of wiggle room of 30 are required. Sometimes students in 12th grade will choose to do a slightly reduced schedule, but we always work with them to make sure, especially if they're an athlete, that they're remaining eligible, that they're thinking about their post-high school plans, things like that. And these are just some examples of different electives in different categories. This will be in the course catalog. Information is always available when we do registration, and it's on the district website as well.
All right, next section, graduation pathway. So my easiest way to explain this is many years ago, or multiple years ago now, there used to be one way to meet the grad pathway, and that was state testing. And every student had to meet a standard in English, and every student had to meet a certain standard in math on the state testing, and you had to meet that standard to meet graduation requirements. What they realized is not every student tests, students test differently, right, in terms of how strong they are as a tester. So they opened up the options to lots of different options to meet that graduation requirement. A lot of students take the testing sophomore year in the spring, and a lot of students will meet the pathway still by meeting the standard in the state testing. But then if a student maybe didn't meet standard, then we have all these other great options to still meet it. And so it never really gets in the way of students graduating, which is really nice, and we work with them on that. So these are just some of the different ones. The Armed Services Readiness, which is a test students typically take senior year, and a lot of times if they are going into the Armed Services, it's like a test they take for that. But it's also, if they score a certain level on that, and it's also they can look at kind of career aptitudes with that test. And our High School and Beyond coordinator, Martha Zender, who's fantastic, she helps kind of coordinate that test a couple times a year. Dual credit courses is another way to do it. We have college and the high school classes, which these are just different options, but I just have to visually look at them. But we have different classes like French 3, Spanish 3, AP World, History, Pre-Calculus. And those are classes where you can earn high school and college credit from taking the class in the high school setting. And it depends on the teacher's certification, which class qualifies each year. But the teacher will tell the students about it and tell them how to sign up. And then what happens is, if they earn credit in that class, then they end up getting credit either through Everett Community College or Whatcom Community College, and they can get a transcript later after high school and then bring that to their college for credit. So that's just an example. There's also Running Start, which we have students that do that. You can't access that till junior or senior year, and that's where you take classes up at Whatcom Community College or Bellingham Technical College and earn high school and college credits. And then AP classes is another way, kind of just to earn credits for college as well if you score a certain level on the AP tests at the end of the year. The other part, which is nice, which I'll show you the highlight of it, but the CTE course sequence. So we have a lot of students who meet their graduation pathway by taking 2 credits in a certain pathway. And I'll show you on the next slide here in a second. And so depending on what they're interested in, so if a student's really interested in sports medicine and they take sports medicine 1 and 2, that can meet their grad pathway, and that'll meet the grad requirement instead of state testing it, for example, which is really nice. And then I mentioned the 10th grade state testing, and then some students also take SAT or ACT or AP tests. SAT and ACT, a lot of colleges now are test optional, which is nice again for students maybe that aren't as strong testers. And so it's not necessarily it still can be a positive thing if a student is a strong test taker, but if they're not as strong, then it's not going to hurt them now in terms of applying and looking at post-high school options. And so this might be hard to see, but the cool part, what I love about this, and all this information is on our website and in our course catalog, but what I love about it is this whole idea of career technical classes and pathways just helps students kind of think about like their interests. And so as you can kind of see, family and consumer sciences or health sciences or STEM, or we have like a wonderful like, in terms of like our engineering program, engineering design. So a student can basically, let's say family and consumer sciences, let's say they take health, which is required in 9th grade. They do the beginning cooking class, nutrition and wellness, and then they do culinary arts, which is a year long. Well, that's 2 credits in that area. And so if that's an area that they're even considering for after high school, that can meet the grad requirement for the grad pathway. And again, instead of the state testing. A lot of students will meet the grad pathway, high school graduation requirement in multiple ways, like through the state testing and one of these. But what I love about it is it just helps students kind of think about different pathways and what they might be interested in. And then if they like something, they can just take more classes in that area, which really helps them get the experience and exposure before graduation and kind of learn what they want to do. So this is kind of I just kind of like when we show students this when they're registering and like, oh, just think about this, or you're interested in this or this, and maybe try this and this, And obviously high school, a lot of this is trying different things out too, but if they really find something they like, they can really dive in, and we have students taking like multiple classes in an area all 4 years, which is really nice. So that's just, I really like this visual, so I just want to pass that along to you.
I think I was just going to finish up. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'll be completely honest with you. We just switched to Zello this year, so I'm no expert yet. But this is our new High School Beyond Plan program. And so this is the last graduation requirement out of those 4. This is something that there'll be step-by-step instructions throughout their 4 years as to completing them. So I wish I had more information for you right this very second, but I'm going to learn this year. But this is something that you can access with your students at home. So it could be a really cool way just to say, hey, I know that you're working on your High School and Beyond plan. Let me check out what maybe some of the career path choices or what you received on your matchmaker. I think it's kind of like not a personality test, but more of like a test of things that you might be interested in to help you decide what you're wanting to do later in life. So this is something you can access on our website. And again, will just be something that students will do multiple times a year throughout their 4 years. So I think that's.
Okay. Can we give our counselors one? That was a lot of information. So I think what we're going to do is there's little sticky notes. If you have a question, I'm going to give you time right now to ask to write a question down if you have one that's relevant to this part of the presentation. And while you're doing that, I'm going to have Kim Kirk come up, and we're going to start the next session in just a minute. And then we're going to save the questions. I'll collect the questions, and we'll have a Q&A at the end that is sort of about all 3 topics. Sound good? Okay, so I'll give you a minute right now. If you have a question or 2, go ahead and write them down. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it right over to Kim. Thank you, Counselor.
All right. Thank you all again for being here tonight. I'm Kim Kirk, and like Bethany said, I'm our instructional coach here at C-Home. And so I'm going to try to help walk you through just a couple of the platforms that the majority of our teachers use, and just kind of give you the overhead view of what it is. And if there's more information that you want to know about it, please feel free to contact me anytime. I'm happy to navigate that with you. So Go ahead, you can click to the next slide. So there's two ways that our students can get to these two platforms that teachers use, which is Teams and OneNote. One is they can go through Office 365, meaning we can get it on the web version. So when they're at home, they could access that way using your personal internet to access that way. Or they can access by using it in the app version, which again, if they're logged in through Office 365, they're using either our school internet, or if they have internet at home, they can also access it that way too. So many of our students know that this is kind of the way that they go, and for many of them, it's already pinned at the bottom of their student devices. So what is Teams? All right. Teams is a platform that was kind of rolled out just before we did remote schooling, and then that's what we lived by during remote schooling. So we had Zoom, where we could essentially have all of our students on our screens, but this was the way that all of our teachers at the time transferred any information to students. So any assignments, resources, and things like that. So now, we're not in remote schooling anymore. It's still a platform that many of our teachers have stuck with to assign assignments, provide a way to give students resources that they're using in the classroom. It may be links that they're wanting them to go into for an activity that they're doing in class. It is also a place where if they have assigned assignments, that they can give feedback and grade right into that assignment, so students can receive feedback once that assignment's turned in, and then the teacher would return that. It's a place that teachers can also put a messaging board. They have an announcement to give to their class, so I'll kind of show you that area. And then it also connects students if teachers are also using a OneNote for class. All right, so you could essentially, when you have conversations with your student, live just here and be able to know if a teacher's using Teams and OneNote, or just using OneNote, okay? So every class team looks the same. It has all these features in it. So, and we'll kind of talk about some of these. They have a homepage, class notebook, classwork, assignments, grades, channels. So when a kid clicks on their class team, and they open up first period, it's going to have all that same information as they would on any others. So when a student goes into Teams, they're going to have what we call tiles, and that it then says all of their classes. So many of our students should have 8 tiles for their 8 classes, potentially 9 if their anchor teacher has set one up as well. If they're part of a club or something, they may have another tile, but all students should have 8 tiles, and that's how they navigate into their classes. Next slide. Students can also, and this is nice for you, because what can get kind of messy is saying, okay, click in period 1, now click in period 2, now click in period 3, and let's see what assignments you have. All students have this nifty little gadget right there called assignments, and they can click that, and it will actually list out any assignments that teachers have sent out from any of their classes by date. So when you look at it, it could be on what is upcoming if teachers have passed that out already and they're not due yet. Past due, okay, so we can look at that and see, are there any assignments that you haven't turned in or considered late? And then any that are completed, all right? So how you can tell if something's completed, they're gonna have check marks potentially that it's been turned in. If teachers have set up the assignment to score it there, that's where you're gonna see points or something to that reference, okay? So that's a nice way to just kind of navigate if you just want to see a list of assignments that students are doing and kind of check that and check kind of back and forth between Skyward and what might be sitting there.
Is this tied to Skyward?
Yes, they can, but not, a lot of teachers don't necessarily use it to the realm of Skyward because they're not ready for it to be for all view. They might just be using it as a feedback component and not just in that moment and not to be scored in Skyward. So if a student, so this is what the interface would look like if a student received an assignment from a teacher. So I send out an assignment to students. Each individual student would open up that assignment. They might have instructions from the teacher, and they may have attached resources. Those attached resources could be websites, they could be a Word document, it could be a PDF, it could be a PowerPoint slide, it could also be the connection to it within OneNote for that assignment. So students would then click on this, and then it would pop up to whatever the teacher's wanting them to navigate to. If a student needs to attach something, all right, they also have these buttons here. So they can click attach, and it would pop up to say, where do you want to, what file do you want to attach, where do you want to attach it from? So they go into where they've saved that particular item. So if they've created folders in their OneDrive, or if they've got it saved to their desktop, they can navigate to do that. They would attach that document, and then that's the important button for them. When they're all done, they then want to click that and turn it in. This is a great thing if you're just wanting to check. A lot of students sometimes forget, I completed it, I did the thing, and they forgot this last step, that they didn't turn it in. Teachers can still see on the back end what students have or haven't done, but a lot of times teachers, just for quick reference, are seeing who's turned things in, who hasn't, just as kind of their own record keeping. So that button, and then they get a nice little like graphic that jumps out at them, like, yay, you did it, like the dinosaur, or whatever might be the graphic of the day. The other way that you and students can view, and you have to ask your student to get on their device for you to view any of these pieces. Parents don't have access into these platforms. Is you can ask them to say, hey, let's open up second period AP Environmental Studies, and let's actually step by step see what just is happening in that class. So they can click on that team, and then that's where I said where all those different things that are similar exist. And when you click assignments, you can go through all the assignments, and it's also posted in what we call the general channel. So anytime a teacher posts any assignment, it just goes right into this posting area. So just think of it like if you were posting anything on any social media platform, it's kind of that same similar idea. It has your running history if you were on your page on that. So same for the students in that. To get into the assignment, they would just click view assignment, and like that previous slide, you'd be in the assignment. So that's Teams. So what is OneNote? Well, think of OneNote. Yeah, write your questions down about Teams that you might have. Think of OneNote, best way to describe it is to think it like old school when we went to school and we had binders, or we put everything in a file cabinet. That's essentially what this is in digital style. So this was our first platform that we were ever introduced to as teachers, and what many of us introduced to our students prior to Teams coming out. So in this platform, very similar to Teams, teachers can distribute assignments to students. They can view their pages. They can also type and write with the stylus pen any feedback. Students can also interact with those pages just like they can in Teams. Students can upload, just like they can in Teams, any images or assignments or documents and things like that. It also has a location, an easier location if teachers are wanting group collaboration with students as well. Next slide. So every class notebook has the same parts, so we'll walk through that. All right, so they have these, essentially these 4 different areas. All right, walk through what each one of those are too. So this is what, when you open up a class notebook, this is what it will look like. There's a welcome page. So students can click on that, and maybe right there, that's where teachers just have a welcoming. You're in, welcome to U.S. history. Here's how you can contact me. Maybe some of their basic grading information. Maybe their syllabus is found in that location. Okay. The collaboration space, that is open for all students if teachers have clicked it to be on. Teachers can click it to be off. But if they have it clicked on, that is an area where teachers might navigate groups of students to go to because they're doing a group activity together, and the teacher wants each group to record, so they'll create pages for those groups, and every student in that class has access to any of those pages. Okay? The content library, this is a read-only function, so students can view anything that the teacher puts in there, but they can't actually manipulate it. They can't change it. They can't add to it. If they want that document, they would have to copy it and move it over to their individual folder. And then every student, and I'll show you another slide on that, has their own personal folder as well. So this is a lot of times where teachers will put all their different resources depending on how they're using OneNote. So some teachers use it as just as a placeholder for all the different resources that they've used in class, be readings, organizers, different things like that. All right, and that's all they're using OneNote for. Other teachers might actually be using it as this is where all of our work is happening. So this is from my previous class. So that's how I used OneNote. So my OneNote was set up that this was our unit. This is what we're doing every day. This is the template that we're using. And then I distributed through teams. So students, we lived here, even though we were in teams, and I'll kind of talk about that so that doesn't seem too confusing, okay? So now we're back at an interface that maybe is a little familiar because this is Teams. We're back at Teams, all right? So why I'm showing you this is you can ask your child, does your teacher use Teams or OneNote? And if they say they only use OneNote, you go, great. Can you open up your team and take me to the OneNote? And that is what students can do. As soon as they open up their class team, they would click on Class Notebook, and they would get the OneNote that I just was showing you. All right? So they're 2 separate apps, but we can both talk to each other. So Teams will talk to OneNote, and OneNote can be connected into Teams. So essentially, students might be living in 2 places, but they might only having to live in 1 place in that, okay? So this kind of shows you content library and what I have. This would be student name, and then this is their folders that as a teacher I distributed out to them, and then I control what I want in those folders. They can add if they want things in their own personal folders, and I can see that at any given time on my end. They only have access to theirs, and no other students. Students can, if they want, and some do, is they can go into Teams, and if they're like, I don't want to work in the Teams interface, and I want to work in OneNote, they can then open and choose how they want to view it. They can go as the app, or they can go click on the browser, and it'll go into Office 365 view. And I know we're going to do questions at the end, so go ahead and start jotting if you have any questions, and I'll make sure to answer those. But when at home and you're wanting to know what students are using, they should know. And if they say, we don't use any of those, there's a chance that that's true, but I would encourage you to say, well, show me Teams. That is a great place to start, especially since if teachers are just using OneNote, you can see that by going right into Teams. And you will go right in and go, well, let's see what this assignment thing is, and click on that, and then you'll be able to notice, all right, are there assignments that teachers are posting on that? Okay? All right, thank you.
Okay, I'll give you a minute. If you have some questions you want to write down, we'll come through and grab those and then curate the questions so we can give you some answers to your questions. I know I had some questions when I listened to that, so I asked my own questions and I want the answers to. Okay, so now I get to bring up the rest of the lovely admin team. My favorite team to work on, right here. Like I said before, I'm Bethany Barrett. I'm one of the assistant principals. As assistant principals, we break the alphabet into 2 halves. I work with students whose last names are L through Z.
And I'm Mike Kudo, the other assistant principal, and I work with students with the last name A through K. So yeah, really enjoy working with your students, and this.
This is our principal. Send home.
Hello everyone, I'm Sonia Cole, principal here. This is my 5th year working with this lovely building and with our community. We're excited to be here. Thanks for coming. And I just want to do a big thank you to Bethany, who has organized our whole Community Academy series. This is our 3rd one. And so she'll also be telling about a couple of the other opportunities for learning and bringing people together to continue to connect and engage and discover. And I think that there's some real beauty in coming together around these things. So thank you for being here this evening. Thanks, Bethany. Thanks to our counselors and to Kim for sharing this evening, and for all of you for coming. And to Luke Holkerts and his team for recording. A little technical piece is that these slides and this recording will all be available on the website. So I see some of you taking pictures, which is great, but also we'll post it so that you can see those as well. So this piece, we're just going to talk a little bit about C-Home visioning and some of the things that we're working on and that we're all about. And hopefully you have heard about and seen from your students and the things that we value as a community. So this first piece is really about the belonging gap. Have any of you ever seen this before? Okay. Mr. Holkerts has, thank you. So how many of you have heard of an achievement gap? Yeah, an opportunity gap. So this is the most recent research around what really gets in the way of student success, and that is actually belonging. So if students do not feel belonging, or actually humans in general, that sense of belonging and connection, there's actually a gap to being able to learn and to be together. So if you'll go to the next one. That white slide. So when the research came out, these were the action words that really talk about belonging. And so these are the pieces that we can actually improve student outcomes. So thinking about how do we create opportunities for students to be needed, to be heard, supported, accepted, known, and welcomed. And so that was really our kickoff for our staff. How do we do that for each other? How do we do that for our students? And how do we do that for our community? How do we create these spaces where we're actively going against and creating opportunities for belonging and connection? So if you go to the next one, we know that this is the gap, and we know, so dramatic. It looks like this person is running around on a wheel, but really if we think about that as a stair, we know that belonging, and if we can create those opportunities and connection, that really that is the pathway to learning. So this has been kind of our journey as a C-Home staff for years, but we've really anchored ourselves in one quote from Cornelius Minor that goes like this: inclusivity in the context of teaching and learning does not simply mean that you're allowed to be present here. To be included means that we've changed ourselves and our practices to make here a place where you can thrive. And this year we've really kind of anchored this thrive word in that sense of belonging and connection, and continuing to think through what that means. So C-Home has been on that pathway of really looking at who are we as a C-Home community that includes our families, our students, our parents, our teaching staff, and how do we create a place where any kid, any family can show up as their authentic selves, and we have a place ready for them. And we have opportunities for them to engage that feel meaningful. And I think we hear that from our counseling team. How do we continue to look at what classes are offered so that every kid has a way to enter and to feel like there's a place for them? And then how within those classes do we continue to create opportunities where students can engage and feel like there's always an access point for them? And that has truly been the work of this place. If you'll go to the next one, Kim. Our work really began looking at students with disabilities and thinking about what are the outcomes for them long term. And we really looked at the data around segregated settings. And we know what segregation has done for humans in general, but we've kind of used that population to really be a linchpin for moving all of our work. So that was kind of where we started, like how do we move students out of like a life skills separate setting into the general ed classroom? And then once they're there, we realized we've got to change some things about ourselves and our practices. And we really realized that as we make access points for students, we really consider all of these. So students who are multilingual, who come to our spaces represented through the LGBTQ+ community, students of color, our students who have experienced significant trauma, students who are living in poverty, our Indigenous students, students with housing instability, and students impacted by anxiety and depression. And like I said, just students who show up just how they are. Anyone can come just how they are into the classroom, and we have teachers and staff who are ready for however that is. So one of the things that we started with staff was even just seating. So like you'll see in all of the classrooms where you can sit at a small table with a regular chair, a rocking chair, a tall chair, on the floor. And really, I think we've pushed on what that means to show up in the space and to be okay with each other and to acknowledge that. And so that's really been the journey of C-Home. How do we continue to be that space where we examine ourselves and our practices to create that sense of belonging? And so that's really been kind of our vision to continue to bring to light that in our community.
And so when thinking through that lens of developing belonging, some ways that we support that, I mean, Bethany and I, as kind of the assistant principals, have the opportunity to work with students around correcting behavior, improving behaviors, but we kind of wanted to identify some of those things that we really think are high leverage points to support students. One of those things, especially, is attendance. One we shared with all age groups this year, just around kind of the 90% target. Like if students are able to attend school 90% of the time, really good academic outcomes. As you dip under that 90%, it just becomes more of a challenge for a student to stay on top of the coursework that's occurring. And with 8 periods alternating every other day, it just can be really challenging. And so just, always wanting to communicate with families, like if you have students that are going to be absent, plan absences ahead. We do have a kind of pre-absence form that allows a student to kind of go in and check with each one of their teachers to get an idea of like, these are the assignments you're going to miss, and just kind of that awareness, and also just kind of keeps it on a teacher's radar of, hey, the student's going to be gone, just kind of, these are the things you can work on while you're away. And then always wanting to call, excuse absences if it's an excusable reason to miss school. Sleeping in is actually not an excuse to miss school. It happens, but it's one of those challenges with adolescents. I know that getting a student out of bed isn't always the easiest task for people. But then I'm going to talk a little bit about our cell phone policy. I've sent messages out to all of you. You probably received my voice message, my email, my text message. We really tried to get it out there. We've also met with each student group in like the large group. Every teacher has communicated typically their cell phone policy, but we really put a lot of effort at the start of the year to want to identify that there's a lot of challenge with cell phones right now for adolescents. You know, when the Surgeon General came out last spring and really emphasized just the impact on mental health, we just felt like as a teaching staff, as a community of learners, this is something that we can't just be like, yep, it's okay that they can have it all the time. So wanting to have something that's really consistent to support learning in the classroom. And so our phrase is off and away. And if you would also support your adolescent in that process by hopefully not texting them in the middle of class. Not that you know our schedule, because it changes all the time. But yeah, just supporting them around that. We do have some corrective measures as far as like if a student has it out. And some teachers have a system where a student can just kind of put it in, voluntarily kind of set it in a space. But if they don't manage that well, then they're just given an envelope and they walk down to the office and turn it in. They can get it at the end of the day. So it is entertaining at times when the students show up. There's usually like a couple students lately that just kind of show up to pick up their phone at the end of the day, and they talk about their story of like, why did you get yours taken out, as they're signing their phone off, but getting it back. But yeah, I think we've heard a lot of positive feedback from families as far as how it has maybe changed some of the ways that their child is interacting with their phone and thinking about their phone. I think I heard a story, maybe you shared a story of just a parent that said, my child actually comes home and talks about their day in class differently than maybe when it was on their phone. So we're hopeful and really positive about it, and it's been something that's been, we think it really supports all of our students in their learning. So hopefully that's been a positive thing for you, but feel free to write on a slip if you have questions about it for sure. So.
Okay, I'm going to just sort of put these three topics together into one. Mike and I mean, Sonia does her fair share of interacting with students around all kinds of situations, both positive and challenging. So the three of us work together a lot when it comes to student concerns. And we did a big push at the beginning of the year with different classes, teaching them about how to report if something was going on that made them uncomfortable, if they saw things that they needed to report, how to use our tip line. So hopefully that's, if you asked your child, do you know how to use the See Home tip line? They would say, yes, I know how to use it. And if they don't, I encourage you to reach out to one of us and be like, my kid doesn't know how to use the tip line, in which case we'll pull them aside and teach them how to use it. It's a really important part of belonging in our school and that sense of safety that students have, that when they walk into a space, it's a safe space for them. And it's a space where they don't have to worry about being harassed or intimidated or bullied, or they don't have to worry about sexual harassment, and they don't have to worry about hate or any kind of bias that they might feel. So these three topics have really clear, it says HIB. Who knows what HIB means? Nobody but a school person. Sorry. It's harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And I think I wrote that as a note, and then I didn't go back and change it, so that's on me. But those three topics have very clear policy in our school district. And if you've never looked at school district policy before, it's riveting. You can go onto the school district website and go all the way to the bottom of the page, and there's a bunch of links on a blue section of the page, and one of them says policies and procedures. And if you click on it, it takes you to all the policies that govern most of what happens around here and in the district. And there's one tab, it's the 3000 series, and that's about students. And if you click on that, it has detailed policies and procedures for many, many things, including these three topics. And we walk through these topics with students if there's ever a concern that there's been harassment, intimidation, and bullying, if there's concern about sexual harassment. And this is our first year to have a hate and bias policy. So that's been a district process for the last 2 years.
and now we have an official policy. It's actually really lovely to have something to lean back on that is very clearly denotes like what is hate, what is bias, and what is the district response and the student accountability around that. So, you know, sometimes it's not the most fun topic, but it is such an important way for us to connect with students and to give them the support that they need. So if you have any questions about those policies, we've all been well versed in them. We have district office staff that help support us with those. Please don't hesitate to reach out about them. We take those topics really seriously, and we want to act on them as soon as we hear anything. And then, of course, our student discipline policy, another policy, kind of outlines like what do we do when a kid hasn't been following the rules the way that they're set out at school. And you know, I remember when I first got this job, people were like, oh, and they still do it. Assistant principal, ugh, you're the one that like everyone's scared of, or you have to do all the dirty work. And I was like, actually, it feels like I have the best job. I just get to build relationships all the time with kids. And sometimes those are because they did something really challenging, and sometimes it's because they did something really awesome. But either way, the outcome is how do we help correct the behavior in a way that restores your relationship to the community and to each other, and that allows us to be in a space together where we all belong. Like, that's the purpose of student discipline. It's not intended to be punitive. That's not how we want to roll it out. Our intention is to how do we restore you back to our community in a way that feels really good for you and really good for the rest of us. So hopefully a visit to the principal's office is not, you know, what sort of in our mind we think of for maybe our own childhood. And then finally, just on the other side, our sign-in, sign-out sheets, it's just one tool that teachers use in their classrooms to keep track of kids. And you can imagine you've got 35 kids in your classroom, and any one of them at any given time needs to use the bathroom or get a drink of water. And some of them know how to do that really efficiently and get right back to learning, and some of them are like, I'm free. And then you're like, where did they go? And I don't see them again for 30 minutes. So we have a system that we work with teachers, and with the teachers work with around students to keep them accountable to that time in and out of class. It also helps us keep track of them if you call and say, hey, my kid has a dentist appointment and I need them to be waiting for me. I'm going to be there in 10 minutes. And we're like, well, I hope we know where they are, you know, when we go to their class. So this is another system that helps us. So sometimes some of the conversations we have around students is using this process efficiently. And so another thing you can help support your child around is making sure that they're following the system that teachers have in their classrooms, and that they're using the systems for the things they need and getting back. Because what we don't want to have to do is take away anyone's privilege of being able to leave the classroom and get their needs met. So that's just one important practice that we have around supporting learning. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention is sometimes parents have no idea what happens when your kid is home early, but you're like, why do my kids have an early release? Like, what is this Purple Friday business? Like, I know it's great for kids, but like, what happens in the schools? Well, those are times when teachers are working together. So early releases, teachers actually are contracted to be at school, and they're doing collaborative work together. So all that stuff that Sonia talked about around belonging, around inclusion, we're leaning heavily on universal design for learning and incorporating that into our classrooms. Like, that takes a lot of time and energy that teachers need together to do that work. And so those early releases, when your kids are somewhere else, but not here, we're working together. And then on those Purple Fridays, we're also spending all day together, doing that learning together. So just so you know, that's what we're doing when your kids are unsupervised. No, they're probably not. You probably know exactly where they are. Okay, that is the, I know where mine are. That's the last sort of like formal presentation part. But if you want to take a minute, any questions you have, we're going to come around and grab your sticky notes. And then all of us are going to come up here, and we're going to have a chance to answer some of those questions depending on who they're oriented to. So I'll give you a minute to write any last questions down.
And we'll grab it from you.
Also, if you need a drink of water, if you want to get another can of soda or water, I guess it is. Or pizza.
All right, your first question is taking the state test for math and English a requirement?
So it's not required for graduation. We encourage students to take it in 10th grade. It's part of the school day. It just gives feedback to us as a school. It gives feedback to them where there's no stakes tied to graduation. I would say you know your student, and if you feel like there's a reason for them not to test, there is always an opt-out opportunity. We don't force students to take the test, but it is during the school day and we encourage them to take it to get feedback and also for us as a school. But as Mr. Vandermolen said, it's not tied to graduation anymore.
And I'd say too, if it causes a lot of stress and anxiety, don't do it. That's because you know your kid. So if that's kind of a clear one. Anyway, sorry.
The next one, summer school options, specifically for taking geometry. So we offer summer school through the Bellingham Public Schools. It's all in the same, all schools go to the same summer school. And there are online options, so it's through a program called Edgenuity. And that specific question around geometry, I would say is a bit tricky. So traditionally, a student will get through a semester's worth of a course, and geometry is a year long. So that would be a really intentional conversation with your counselor, with the student, being able to know you're basically going to be completing a semester class in 3 weeks. So it is an accelerated program. So if you're interested in that, we usually get information right after spring break as to how to sign up and what that will look like. And then we usually have a list, so we can also reach out individually. So if you just let your counselor know, we'll get you on the list to also send that out, but that comes from the district.
I would also just add, if you have questions, if it's about math sequencing and you're concerned about where your student's endpoint for math is and whether they'll get to the math that you or they are hoping to get to based on where they start, that's a great conversation to have with their counselor, because there are certain years where students could double up in math during the school year, and that would be a scheduling thing that we'd work with them and consult with their current math teacher, and we would get them going to reach their endpoint. We always work from the back end to say, where do you want to end up your senior year in math?
Just grab,
Yeah.
grab it and going. Belonging. Are there any clubs for a non-academic oriented, non-sport oriented person, i.e. a social club, or volunteering? I would say, so I'm the advisor for the Diversity in Action Club, and I'll be honest, I think most of our time is social time. And I think just to say that, because I think a lot of our clubs do, the kind of point is to get together, have an opportunity to connect. I know a lot of our clubs do really great work, so they have projects or they're developing events. Some things are specific around chess or around, we used to have a whistling club. There's all sorts of different kinds of things. So I think what I would recommend is, I don't think there's like a social club necessarily, but there is a social aspect to a lot of them. So if there's there's a list on our website that gives all the different clubs, the advisors, You could also come to your school counselor and say, hey, I'm interested in, or we could just kind of, through conversation, be like, oh, I kind of heard that you like drawing. Well, what about art club? You know, maybe it's not academic or sports oriented necessarily, but we can kind of work together to figure out what that looks like. Or you can start a club. So you just need to find an advisor, and any student can start a club.
I just want to say, there's a club for everyone. Dungeons and Dragons, anime, there's a GSA club for students that identify within the gender and sexuality category, LGBTQ. There's a club called YMS that is Young Multiracial Society, so students of color. There is like peer-centered outreach if you're interested in like sharing about mental health and substance use. There's really a club for everyone.
What is required for my student to take an AP class? Great question. So AP classes are like any classes. We look at them for interest. Usually it's a class where students will go deeper into a topic, maybe go at a little bit faster pace, be with peers who are really excited to be learning about a certain topic. There's a lot of different AP classes, and we always talk to students about fit. Some AP classes have prerequisites, so we want to make sure students are prepared. But especially going into 10th grade, AP World, we mentioned students will take a world history. So if they're really interested in history, that's a great one to do with your 10th grade peers. But again, if they're interested in taking an AP class, just looking in the course catalog, finding classes of interest, looking if they're open, what grade level, and if they have any prereqs. And thinking about balance with the other classes they're taking.
So another question, are there tutors or mentors for students who aren't doing well in a specific class? So yes, I guess there's a couple answers to that. One is, first of all, if it's a 9th grader, then we have our peer mentorship program. So like there's 8 to 10 9th graders assigned to 2 mentors. And those mentors are juniors and seniors who've been trained. So they come into the anchors, and we have anchor twice a week. So they come in once in a while and do activities and connectivity activities. So that could be an opportunity to connect with one of them, for them to connect with one of them and see what's available. We also have peer tutors spread throughout the building. So some students, especially junior and senior year, sign up to be a peer tutor in a class, whether it's a math or a history, with a teacher maybe they've had before. And so some classes have peer tutors already in them, and the teacher can actually utilize them to connect with the student in that class. My recommendation would be like reach out to that teacher first, because sometimes it's even within that class, they can kind of like match them up with someone, even a peer in the class to sit next to you, but there also might be a peer mentor. And then the last thing I'll say is we do have tutoring. We have someone that can coordinate tutoring in the building, and they're volunteers, that from Western or student tutors. But it's during the school day right now, so it's either during lunch or during anchor, but we do have someone that can kind of coordinate that. So you can reach out to the counselor for that. We can kind of help with that.
One more. What is the availability access for the counselors for mental health support during the day? So mental health support is part of the scope that we work with students. So in addition to guidance, we also work with students around mental health, social emotional support, and then career guidance. So with all of that, it is, we're not available to do like a weekly meeting for the whole school year, but we do have resources in our office. So we usually call it the counseling office, or you might have heard that from your students, but really it's the student support office. So we have Christina, who's available to work with students more specifically around intervention prevention, but also mental health. We also have a mental health counselor in our office. She's there only 2 days a week, so right now I believe she may be full, and there are some insurance restrictions around that. But we have another person that actually works in the district, and she supports students finding outside counselors and can do some short-term counseling. So, that's kind of a hard question to answer, because I think it also just depends on the needs of your student. And the next question is more around absences, so I think I might slip that one to the admin. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Does Teams notify a teacher when a student turns something in late? It does not. So that is one of the components that many times our teachers are consistently going in and rechecking and seeing because they have kept track of who's turned in what and who hasn't. And it's also, I think, an important practice for students if they're turning in something late to say, hey, Ms. Kirk, I just turned that in, just so you know. So it just puts it on radar for the teacher, but it doesn't trigger teachers on that piece. How do you sign up for Skyward? Stay after and I'll help you with that. But it might be 1, you've already there and we just need to get your password. 2, we just need to connect with this school district and make sure that you're connected with your child with the right school and all of those things. So see me after and I'll get you that information. Can students turn in assignments in Teams that they didn't actually finish? Yes, they can. Yes, they can. So they can click it, but the teacher can see all of that. So anything that the teacher pushes out to students and students return or don't, teachers can see on any realm. It doesn't have to be turned in. So teachers can see that something's completely blank to be able to have that conversation with students. Will tests be available on Teams, not just grades, so we can go over this substance with them and find areas to work more? So it depends on teachers if they put their assessments on Teams. Many of our teachers use still paper assessments, and there are some that do provide within assessments. So when we think of assessments, for many of our teachers, excuse me, my voice is cracking. Many of our teachers' assessments aren't necessarily like traditional that many of us have experienced of like maybe multiple choice components. So there might be some writing, it might be a project. Those pieces might be connected into Teams. If they are writing a paper, let's say for English, they may have turned it in for Teams, or their teacher may have required that they write it and then they print it out and give the teacher a hard copy. So it's kind of teacher dependent on that if they're using Teams for an assessment piece on that. Great question. Why isn't the use of Teams or OneNote standardized for all teachers? Shouldn't all teachers follow the same procedures? That's a great question. I think we're continuing to work in that realm. And the area that we are working is that we are using more to the Teams side of things because it can interface with OneNote for teachers that really are used to creating their classes around OneNote, that they can have Teams speak to it and put their assignments out that way. I think some of those pieces come back to our remote time when we were consistently all on screens. So it's finding that balance of not being on screens 24/7, and also the realms that there's great use still around, you know, pen, paper, pencil, the thing in front of you, and composition books and things like that. So it is a piece that we're continuing to have conversations and working to try to systemize that across the board. That's going to be a counselor question right there. Are you ever going to have a separate login for Teams for parents instead of going through students' computers? So that has been a long time discussion around Teams since the time that it came out. That if administration, meaning district tech, when I say that, if they turn on that component, every time a teacher sends an assignment, you get a notification. And what we found is then, what happened is then on the back end, teachers were receiving email, explain this, explain this, explain this, explain this. So I think it's still trying to find that balance of how to communicate with families and having teachers communicate with families, here's what's coming up and this is what we're working on, so you're in the know, and at the same time that balance of you not getting 1,000 notifications and vice versa just off of that. So I think that's a piece that we're still navigating in that, but that's why it's not interfaced for it to be turned on. If my son struggles with executive functioning, is there help with the use of these software programs outside of class? Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to connect with any student who might need assistance in what best way to organize and to check. Our teachers are great in also having those conversations, but if you have a student who needs just some one-on-one sit down to kind of go through their classes, please have them connect with me. I'm happy to sit down and work with them on that. That's to admin and that's to Cassie.
All right. Cool. You're up. So there's a couple questions around the HIT policy. So we thought we might just kind of exit out and show you where our school board policies are, so that if you're ever interested. So here's our website. If you just go to the district website, which is bellinghamschools.org, couple locations. You can either find it under About. So. Yeah, so if you go to About, this is one location, so it's just policies and procedures.
I'll show you where I go.
Yeah,
I
or
just scroll to the bottom,
just scroll,
and I go right there.
and it's also right here. So,
And I'm gonna click on it.
so that's where all of the policies are, and most of the policies that involve your student kind of fall in the 3000 series. And if you scroll down to about the middle, there's a break with a bolded section that refers to, keep going, right here, so student rights and responsibilities. And the first three policies and procedures are those ones that we were just discussing regarding.
One of the things to know about how policy is written in our district, and probably a lot of other places, is there's a policy and a procedure that's connected to the same topic. So policy 3205 is our sexual harassment of students prohibited policy. That will give, if you read the policy, it kind of gives you the overview, like this is what we consider sexual harassment, this is why it's not okay. And then you go to procedure, and this outlines what happens if somebody puts in a formal complaint, or if it's an informal complaint. And what is the district procedure that's like step by step by step by step outlined about that. So you'll find that for the sexual harassment policy, you'll find that for the for 3207, which is our harassment, intimidation, and bullying policy. You'll also find that for hate and bias. It's called bias, incident, and hate speech, a policy and a procedure. And one of the questions was about how is hate and bias different from harassment, intimidation, bullying, and sexual harassment, which is a great question. This policy deals really specifically with what is the definition of hate speech and a bias-related incident. So if somebody does something that is racially motivated, that is motivated because of like a religious hate event or something, that would fall under our bias incident and hate speech. This gives us an overview of how we define those terms and then what the procedure is, and they're very specific to students. So it's important to know that when you're looking at the 3000 series, we're talking about students. If you want to know about staff, that's a whole separate series that have their own policies. So this is very specific around students. Okay, so I think that answered actually a few questions. And if you want to read them, you can find out all kinds of things. One of them was, what is a summary of the harassment, intimidation, and bullying policy? I encourage you just to read the policy part. The procedure is like, goes deep into the weeds around what happens if someone puts in a formal complaint. So this question around, let's see, where are the pre-absence forms, and do you recommend that form for a missed class or an appointment, like an orthodontist appointment, or is it more for vacations or multiple days? So if your kid has a doctor's appointment or an orthodontist appointment, or they're sick, you just call in to the main office. There's also, you can do it through Parent Square, because you'll get one of those notifications that's like, your kid missed today. You actually have an opportunity right in that message to click and give a response to it, like, please excuse my kid for this period. And if it's something like that, you don't need a pre-planned absence. We don't require that for, or you can even give your kid a handwritten note. It's like, please admit my kid because they had an orthodontist appointment, and then sign your name and date it, and give it to them when they go into school. And they'll take that right to the attendance office, and we'll excuse it and take the note, and we actually file those notes, so that if there's ever a question about like, who wrote that note? Not saying we ever get those questions, but we have them on file. If it's a pre-planned absence, like we have a family wedding that's happening in Massachusetts, over Thanksgiving break, and my kid's gonna miss the 3 days before. That's something that you can pre-plan for. We have those forms in the main office. Your kid can come up to the office and say, I need one of those pre-planned absence forms. They go around all their teachers, they get information from their teachers, what they will miss, what their current grade is, you sign it, and then we sign it, and it's just sort of information for everyone to have. So that's sort of the difference between those two ways of excusing.
So why is the class schedule following an AB day with such long classes? So the AB schedule, the 8-period day, was established, I think about 6,
Further.
Further, 7?
Further.
I think it's that long? Yeah, maybe
About 8
7,
years.
8 years. Okay,
It's
so
probably-
it was part of a very large kind of district-wide team of students, staff, district level, parents, just trying to look at like kind of needs of students. How do we make more offerings available in regards to elective offerings? So if you think of a traditional 6-period day, if you think of the credit requirements that the counselors kind of went through, with a 6-period day, a student would only be able to access 24 credits through the course of 4 years. Which is this also like just matches the state's credit requirements, which when you think of that number of that elective number that's at the bottom, I think it's 9.5 for with the 8-period day. That elective number gets a lot smaller. There's a lot less kind of offerings that students can explore because they still need to get their English, they still need to get their math, and so the 8-period day kind of came out of the desire to build more of that. Now, why it was chosen as AB or kind of that alternating, there is some, during COVID we transitioned to just doing 4 at a time and then switched over to 4 just to kind of manage it. And Options High School currently does where they just do 4 and then they switch at the quarter, and then they do the other 4. So there's kind of some wiggle as far as kind of exploring how it goes, but there's definitely no perfect system, and I would say every year the conversation comes up, and the desire to provide feedback and explore is this the right system for our students. If you have feedback or thoughts about it, you're welcome to share that with us, with district level leadership, because we're always kind of trying to figure out what's the right fit to support our learners in the midst of also knowing that like there's a lot on a kid's plate, and kind of juggling it all. So yeah, good question. But they are long classes. And I will say our staff are also working at trying to build, like what does breaks, what does like just natural kind of like ebb and flow in a class period, so that not necessarily like, okay, everybody just don't do anything and just get on your phones, right? Because that's not a great kind of strategy, but like how do you like kind of transition a little bit so that you get a little bit of direct instruction, you get a little kind of chatting, you get some up and moving up the boards, and so those are things that we talk about with our staff.
Okay, I know it's 7:30. I'm just going to address one more question, and I think it's sort of it's a good one to end on because it ends with the message that if you ever hear something from your kid and you wonder, is this true? I just went to this parent night at Seahome, and they told me something very different than what you're telling me now. Start by trusting your kid. Because the truth is, there are, how many teachers in this building? 80 teachers in this building, and we may be up here and say this is what teachers do, and your kid may have a teacher that does it differently than what we're saying. That is just gonna happen, and it may be the way that it works best for the teacher in the classroom. So, start by believing your kid, but if it really doesn't sit well with you, email the teacher and say, my kid tells me that they can use their cell phone in your classroom. While I just heard about this off and away policy that Seahome High School has, I'm just curious, is this true? And then the teacher will respond with their policy, because the truth is every teacher nuances it a little bit to fit the needs of their own classroom. So you may have your kid say, no, I know that there's this off and away plan for cell phones, but my teacher has a different policy in their classroom. So if your kid can't describe in detail what that other policy is, then reach out to the teacher and be like, can you help me understand, like, what's the expectation for my kid in your classroom with their cell phone? I just want to support them and I want to believe them. So that would be for most things that you might like trigger a question mark in your head around. So that's our last question. Stick around if you have other ones that are more specific that you need to ask. Thank you very much for sticking through the hour and a half. We really appreciate all your questions and your attention, and we really love hanging out with your kids all day. So, thank you.